Hi everyone, and welcome to this edition of In the Studio. Today we're going to be taking a look at what I like to call a world hybrid drum set. This is a drum set configuration that I've been developing for a lot of different years with some of the artists that I work with. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the ins and outs of it, how I put the setup together, and why. If you are new to the series, please take a minute to reach down and hit that subscribe button. Like and share the video. It's the best way that you can help me out as I try to build this channel and share as much knowledge and detail about the world of percussion as I possibly can. If you have a question, a topic, or a subject that you'd like to hear me explore in depth in a future video, put it down in the comments. I do check the comments, and I'm always looking for inspiration and new ideas of videos to make for the future. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about this animal, the World Percussion World Hybrid Kit. So where this idea began for me, I was working with an artist, Persian singer named Mounted Djembe. And Momak has sort of this fusion style that she created for her music that's a blend of traditional Persian music, traditional Middle Eastern styles, along with house and trance music. She sort of has this aesthetic. She loves this four on the floor, really driving rhythm while being accompanied by world percussion instruments. And it's a very distinct percussion style, this Persian style of finger drumming. And in order to effectively accompany her songs and the band, I sort of had to configure a kit, a drum set, where I could really drive with a very heavy trance style beat, a four on the floor type of beat, but also be able to access all the finger technique that's required for Middle Eastern drumming, especially Persian drumming. So I began to experiment, and I went around my studio and pulled out a lot of gear, and as time has gone on, this is the configuration that I've arrived at. So let's just kind of go around the kit and talk about what is actually here. The centerpiece of this is my cajon with a foot pedal. And we've been talking a lot about the cajon foot pedal over these last couple of weeks, and so it's sort of a natural extension of that to talk a little bit about this particular kit and why it's such a prime mover in my world as a drummer. So yeah, I've got my cajon and my foot pedal that I sit on. Now in front of me and around me are an array of different instruments. Okay, right in front of me, this is a Cooperman 20-inch Valron in their Glen Velez series. This is one of my workhorses. Maybe you've seen this in previous videos that I've done, but this is a very old Remo Renaissance head, okay? Cooperman drums are known for being quite resonant and ringy. They have a very long sustain. This instrument, because the head is as old as it is, it's a little bit drier, and that's my preference. I actually have a pickup mounted. We're not hearing the pickup right now. We're just grabbing the sound from the overheads. But there is a pickup just off center here in the head, and that actually helps dry the head up a little bit more. And there's a specific reason for that that I'll get into in just a moment. The other instrument here on my left is called ketem. And the ketem is an Arabic instrument, Middle Eastern drum, and it's primarily used to back up Darbukah with belly dance drum solos. Okay, the sound of this sounds an awful lot like a timbale, but what's beautiful about it is this does have a counter hoop on it, if you can see there in the video, but the counter hoop has been pulled below the bearing edge and there is no rim on it. And what was happening in my earlier configurations where I was using a floor tom over here on my right, and I had a snare drum that I was playing with my fingers, is that you would come up against the edge to get a high snapping tone, and you end up bruising your fingers pretty severely, if not shredding and cutting the skin. So this ketem, this is a very rare instrument built by Kevork in Lebanon, who's one of the top makers of Middle Eastern percussion anywhere in the world. This is a very special instrument and has been a real great addition to this particular kit. To my far right, I've got a djembe. Again, you guys maybe have seen the djembe pop up in some of my more recent videos. And then mounted up here is another Cooperman frame drum. This is a 16-inch tar. Again, those Cooperman drums have really great long sustain and resonance. To my left, I have my rick. Similar to the ketem from Kevork, this is a rick from Hassan Ali from Cairo, Egypt. And this is a very special instrument to me as well. Not only for the quality of instrument, Hassan has built instruments for all of the greatest Arabic drummers of the past, 4 or 5 decades. He has built handmade instruments for a lot of great, great drummers. And I was fortunate enough to meet him in Cairo and get this instrument right from him. And this is a very, very unique instrument, very special. And then as you can see, I've got a lot of brass hanging around me. So I actually had 2 pairs of hi-hats in here. This is just a standard pair of 14-inch Zildjianese, 1960s Zildjianese. Very thin, almost paper thin. What we would call paper thin today, but it's really not a paper thin hat right now. And then this other pair, this is a 12-inch pair of hats that Schlagwerk sells, and I believe these are made by UFIP in Italy. I'm not 100% on that, but this is the Schlagwerk branded hats. And I liked them. They had sort of that crass kind of trashy sound similar to the Zills, and a big contrast from these 14-inch Zildjianese. So it's nice to have this, and I'll explain again why I have a second pair of hats over here in the center of the kit. And then this is a Bosphorus 20-inch ride that I had drilled out with rivets down at Pro Drum Shop here in Los Angeles. And the reason that I selected these instruments, and this Bosphorus cymbal is here for a very specific purpose. It's light enough that I can activate it with my finger. And that's a general guiding principle across the entire kit, is that every instrument here is suitable for the type of finger-driven style that I play with. All right. My technique is sort of a hybrid between finger and full hand technique. And as we do a little bit demonstrations today, you'll see how I manipulate those 2 different techniques between a finger technique and a full hand technique. But I needed instruments that I could easily activate to create a large footprint of sound, but with finger technique. So a cymbal sizzle that has long resonance. Right. Let's start off with a little demonstration. Let me just play around with the kit. You can get a little bit of sense of what each of the different tones do. Just a real quick demonstration. What you can hear is that this sizzle cymbal, as soon as it's active, creates this very nice lush bed all across the kit. These frame drums are very pitchy. They're very pitch centric. And so this is both an advantage and a disadvantage, kind of depending on the context. A lot of the music that I play from these world music traditions I'm describing, Persian, Arabic, Indian, are modal musics, okay? In the sense that there is not a prevalence of vertical harmony, all right? It's not like jazz where there are a multitude of chords and that the bass language underneath it is a chordal harmonic language. That's not the case in this style of music, or these styles that I approach. The core fundamental style is a modal style. And within that style, we're basically going to center around one key. And we're not going to do a lot of key changes in songs. It does happen, but it's not a prevalent feature. As such, I can actually tune these drums to fit within the tonal centers of a number of the different tunes that we play. And I actually have a couple of different frame drums that sometimes they come with me with gigs, and on certain tunes I will substitute this drum out for another one, or I'll substitute this drum out for another one. Really quickly, I want to share something that's quite unique with the way that these particular instruments are mounted. Okay, this is a 16-inch frame drum. And as I said, the one that's in front of me here is a 20-inch drum. And so this is the mounting bracket, okay? This was built by a welder here in Los Angeles. I bought these many years ago. I don't even know if the guy continues to make them these days, but this is an extension that fits. Here I have it mounted off of a cymbal pole, but you can also fit this inside a standard snare drum basket. And that way you can get these extending arms. So you can extend each of these 3 arms out to fit up to a 22-inch frame drum, which is fabulous because, of course, the snare drum stand is not going to fit a instrument of that particular diameter. So very easy for me to pop a drum out and then to replace it with a different instrument that I've tuned to a different pitch. These things are almost like timpani. Okay, and of course, like any frame drum, I'm going to play with a low tone that's somewhere off center, and then I'm going to play edge tones up here. Now, why do I have the instruments at this particular angle? Well, that's the core of this finger technique, or I should say this hybrid finger whole hand technique that I use. Where I start a lot of my building a drum set is around the technique, around the way that I play. I need to access the technique. So these rolls, this is called a riz. This is a Persian technique. Okay? Now, that is a tombak technique, and if you can imagine a tombak surface, if we can for just a moment, is going to go under the hand thusly. And so that riz is going to be played horizontally into the instrument like this. Well, where my journey on the cajon began actually was studying with a Persian drummer. Human Burmedi was his name. And I watched Human apply his technique onto the cajon, and I said, okay, that's what I want to do on that instrument. I want to learn how to do that. And so Human and I were friends. He started teaching me, and that's where my style began to evolve. So you can see that tombak technique that was here easily can apply down here on the cajon. Now I wanted to be able to bring that technique up onto other instruments in front of me. Now, having it at this steep pitch angle down, moving away from me, allows me a very ergonomically comfortable position to get my hands up on the drum and be able to access that finger technique. And that's what inspired the setup the way that we see it right now. Okay? So, that's my rhythmic vocabulary. Arabic rhythms, Persian rhythms, Indian rhythms. This is my vocabulary. So that's where the setup began, was being able to access all of that vocabulary. I later added this djembe over here. And I'm not sure if we can really see well on the camera. Let me see if I can pick up and hold this here. It's a bit of a beast. But this is a very hip mount, all right? This is just welded aluminum from Motherland Music that's down in Inglewood, California. And it's a great shop, really a cool shop. And they build these right there in the back of the shop. And it's nice because it's designed to specifically fit the mouth of this djembe. That's also one of the limitations of it, is it's very difficult for me to pop out one djembe and put another djembe on top of the same mount, because every handmade instrument is going to vary in its dimensions just a little bit. But what that allows me to do is to put the instrument similarly at that pitched angle moving away from me. So now I used this as a Darbukah substitute. All right. I had worked for a long time trying to find a solution to get the Darbukah mounted up here. All right. And short of wearing the drum on a strap, which I don't want to do, there was maybe one other solution, which was to mount it off of the boom arm of a cymbal stand. But because my Darbukah is so heavy, it was difficult to balance it behind me. And it was not a great solution. So I needed to find some other way to get a Darbukah voice here into the drum set. And when I got this ketem, okay, my friend Isan Hushan sold me this drum used, which I'm really grateful for. This is a $1,000 instrument. If I were to resell it, it's worth more now than it was when I bought it from Isan. But it was a beautiful complement to the djembe for just playing straight Darbukah rhythms, but with two hands on two different sound sources. So now I've got that option back. I can play straight up Darbukah grooves. I have the voices to do that. I can let my left hand come down to the cajon and do something similar. Right? I can bring the left hand over here and get a much different timbre. And then I can start messing with the tonal possibilities of the doom tone. All right. That traveling doom, that traveling bass tone. Okay. You can start to put in this melodic contour. And that's what I really, really was going for, was to get some motion behind all the different grooves that I played on this. Okay. Why the two hi-hats? Let me bring the shaker brush out over in here. You want the ability to change up timbre and texture, and you want to do it simply. Otherwise, this drum set would just continue to grow and grow and grow if I wanted to bring in alternative voices. And I've tried a lot of different stuff. Actually, one of the first incarnations of this many, many years ago, probably 15 years ago or more, had mounted congas up in front and bongo. And it was more centric around sort of the Afro-Cuban style. All right. My foot pedals were performing different functions, and certainly the hands were performing different functions, and it was not serving the aesthetic that I wanted. Okay. But back to this idea, how can you vary texture? Because that's really the name of the game when we're talking about drum set playing. You know, if you're a standard drum set player, what do you have? You've got a hi-hat, snare drum, bass drum, and then you have color. Okay. Every other cymbal that you play with is a color instrument. All your tom-toms are color instruments, unless you learn to use those colors to serve different roles and reorchestrate your grooves, right? You may, instead of riding on the hi-hat, turn over and ride on your floor tom, or ride on your ride cymbal, or on one of your crash cymbals, etc., etc., etc. That's the fundamental nature of the drum set. But don't forget, where did the drum set begin? It was the contraption, the trap set. Back in vaudeville days, this is the turn of the 20th century when the drum set first really began, and it really was literally a contraption of different percussion voices in a pit orchestra. They wanted one guy to play all the xylophone parts, all the cowbell parts, all the wood blocks. You needed something that you could play a little bit of rhythm so people could dance, and you also needed to provide sound effects for whatever was happening up on stage. So the contraption, the trap set, turned into our modern drum set. And it really is the same principle behind which I constructed all of this madness, right? But how do I vary these textures? Well, that's got a much different sound than just my hand. Just to reach up there and being able to start activating the hi-hat voice with the shaker brush. And then, you know, you can have fun. Activating both. And so I kind of wanted to find two pairs of hats that sort of, you know, gave a nice complementing texture to one another, specifically so that I could get into this two shaker brush business on the hats, right? That's sort of the ins and outs of the kit a little bit. Now, some of the drawbacks of a drum set like this, it does have a ceiling on its volume, okay? There's a ceiling on all technique. Let's just be perfectly frank with it. All technique does have a ceiling. And the technique that I apply on this particular kit has a low volume threshold. It's very easy to overplay on the instrument and absolutely play beyond what the technique is capable of producing. You lose the nuance. You lose all the nuance and texture, and you don't want to do that. So it takes a lot of discipline when you're on a stage in a multi-thousand seat auditorium, okay, and they're pumping a huge amount of volume and they're trying to make this cajon bass drum sound like, you know, Danny Carey's bass drum on Tool, just absolute God of Thunder type stuff. It's easy to get carried away and think that I've got to drive and play with a lot of aggression and volume. You don't want to do that on a kit like this. And it's a good rule of thumb to constantly remember, keep your volume down on stage and let your fellow musicians also play at a more mellow volume so you can hear one another, and then let the sound guy do his job and pump the sound up for the auditorium, okay? This is always a good rule to be thinking of when you're talking about moving from your practice room off to the stage and what changes between those two venues, okay? I don't have a lot of cymbal variation because there's not a lot of cymbals that I can activate with my fingers. And I do have the shaker brush, yeah, but I'm not going to get a lot of volume from the nylon side. And I don't want to overplay with the metal basket because I'm either going to damage my cymbals or I'm going to break the shaker brush, which I don't want to do. The pitch-centric nature of these frame drums often gets in the way. And it takes very careful orchestration of grooves in order to avoid that. These pitches, they exist in the sonic space where your bass player exists, and you don't want to step on that person's toes. These sounds, the low punch of the djembe, the low punch of the cajon, that has such a different sonic signature to it that it's not going to compete as much with the bass. But the sustained tones, absolutely they do. So one of the things that I do is I use some gaffer's tape and I tape these heads up and I dry them. Now, if I want a sustained tone, that's what that technique is for. That's what a drum roll is, all right? A drum roll is the technique that drummers invented to create the illusion of a sustained tone. It's exactly what it is, okay? These get so washy sometimes in the texture that if I don't dry these heads up, they end up just turning into white noise on the stage, and you do not hear rhythmic clarity. And I'm still a drum set player with these groups I'm playing with. I have to have rhythmic clarity. If I'm not delivering that, I am not doing the job they've asked me to do. So that's where I start to mess around with different timbres, and I use some of the more distinctly dry areas of the kit. The cajon is in a little bit difficult place to reach with all these other instruments right in front of me. And many, many times has this happened where I'm cruising along and trying to come up from the cajon back to the drums, and I smash my fingers into this hardware or against the bottom edge of the shell and come away sometimes with bruised fingernails or bruised backs of the fingers, which is not a happy thing at all. Comes with the territory a little bit. Adjust the technique and move with precision. That's my only solution for that. So there are some limitations to the kit, but for the ability to change timbres and to create as many different unique textures as come out of this kit, it's really a cool thing. It's very, very hip. And I think this is a good place, I should say, for us to conclude today. So thanks again for stopping by. Again, for those of you who are new to the channel, reach down and subscribe, share the video, like the video. It really helps me as I try to grow the channel up. Stop back in another couple of days. I'm going to be putting up some more content talking about this particular kit and some grooves. And I'm going to be taking apart some grooves in the way that I orchestrate and voice them here on the kit. And as always, I'm interested in your ideas. So any comments you guys have, put them down in the comments, and I'll be sure to include those in a future video. Thanks again for stopping by, and of course, as always, happy drumming.
If you liked this video and want to see more like it, please hit the subscribe button. Visit my website for more information on tours, upcoming performances, and updates on all my projects. Thanks so much, and don't forget to share this video.